please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Hello and welcome to the Political Exchange. I'm Shereen, Bhan, and today we're in conversation with author, economist, former minister, Mr. Arun Shourie. Thanks very much, Mr. Shourie, for joining us on CNBC TV18. You know, exactly this time, 4 years ago, is when we had our last conversation when the government had just won the elections, and you had put together a white paper on the economy that you were going to present to Mr. Modi, sir. I don't know whether you remember that conversation or you remember the white paper on the economy that you had put together, but I'll talk to you about your assessment of the economy and the government's track record in a bit. Let me talk to you about the contents of your book and the issue that is capturing mind space and headlines today, and that is the crisis in the judiciary. Whether it is a battle between the executive and the judiciary, or it's a battle within the judiciary itself, these are questions that will be answered over time. But given the fact that yesterday we've seen the decision of the collegium, which has been deferred now on what it intends to do, whether it intends to send back the name to the government or not for a week. What do you make of that? Do you believe that this is an attempt to de-escalate, or do you believe that this is giving in to what the executive wants?
Well, it is obvious that the collegium could not have come to a decision, and the record shows that at least 4 of the judges would have been of one view, that we should send it back. If you look at their letters of the past, statements of Justice Kurian Joseph and others, then therefore it must be that the Chief Justice, I would presume, has taken the view that no, we must give more names if the government wants more names and so on. And that certainly is very convenient for the government. Whatever the motives and reasoning of the Chief Justice, it certainly helps the government.
Do you believe that if the decision is of the collegium to not send back the name to the government as was expected, this is going to deepen the crisis, worsen the crisis?
Yes, it will be a fatal blow to the collegium and to the Supreme Court. If they do not send it back, in fact, they have already delayed it too long. In my view, as I've said earlier, they should not have had an oath-taking ceremony of one judge when they had sent 2 names. That itself was a completely non-Gandhian thing to do.
What is the way out of this now? You know,
the way out is for the judiciary to stand absolutely firm on every little comma. That's the only way.
But do you see that happening?
No, I don't see it happening because of the Chief Justice.
And hence I asked you, what is the way forward? And a few other judges. Pardon? And hence I ask you, what is the way forward?
The way forward is precisely for the others to keep showing up the steps which are being taken that are helpful to the government. For the other judges to keep showing those up, for disclosing them to the public, and for all of us to be vigilant and to keep pinpointing those steps and opposing those steps.
So you're suggesting that the other judges, the 4 judges, for instance, who held the press conference in January, that they should do more of that now?
Yes, they should put it on record. I would really look forward to the time when we get to know the reasons on account of which this decision has again been deferred.
Do you believe that that ought to have been part of the announcement that came in? I mean, there was a one-word deferral that was mentioned by the Supreme Court yesterday. You believe that they ought to have explained why they chose to defer the matter?
Yes, they always keep talking about transparency, isn't it? Doesn't the Supreme Court say that about other people? So what are they doing now? So I believe that the court is in mortal danger because of the mentality of the government to occupy the entire space, geographical space, the institutional space, the personal space. And therefore, for the government, and the government is determined with this. That is why, in my view, it is a totalitarian mentality, total control of the total space. Now, the only pillar left standing is the judiciary, and they will not leave it alone. You block them on the NJAC, they'll come back to you on the appointments. And the kind of things that they, suddenly they wake up to this business of regional representation? I mean, are you again having reservations in one way or the other in this just now?
So you're saying that there is no validity to the argument that's being presented on the regional representation?
Of course not. And that should not be the criterion. Criterion must be competence. Competence to deliver judgments from a national point of view.
Why do you believe that what we're seeing today is worse than what we've seen in the past? I'm not suggesting that, you know, let's do comparisons between the present and the past. I'm saying, why do you believe that what we're seeing today is worse than what has happened in the past? Because the attempts of political capture of independent institutions, including the judiciary, have been attempted in the past.
I just don't understand why journalists keep asking this question. Has there not been murder in the past?
Yes.
Has there not been killing of children in Kashmir in the past through these pellet guns? Does that mean that tomorrow you should do it?
No, I'm not suggesting it makes it any better.
No, then why is the question being asked?
I'm saying, what do you find being different in the manner in which it is being done?
Madam, it is much more determined, it is much more systematic and much more unrelenting than even during the emergency. Secondly, the Supreme Court itself is in a much weaker position in its composition. And in the way, I don't want to, use words that are harsh, but certainly even in the caliber of judges. Do you think that anybody would ever have thought of doing such a thing in the 1950s in India, with Panditji at the helm, or Patanjali Shastri as the Chief Justice? No. And could they have succeeded? Would Mr. Subbarao have kept quiet? No. And during the emergency itself, when Mr. Justice A.N. Ray, Chief Justice A.N. Ray, constituted a bench to overturn Keshwanand Bharati, in 2 days he himself had to dissolve the bench because he saw that all the judges were against the proposition. I don't see that happening today.
So given the fact that you don't see that kind of unity within the judiciary, you
not
see
just unity but caliber.
Plus caliber, plus you see an unrelenting, in your words, attempt on the part of the executive to try and ensure that its will prevails, then what is the way out?
The way out is you have to resist the authoritarian moves of the government in every sphere and every move and go on doing it.
So you said that you would expect that the 4 judges, like they did the press conference in January, to continue their attempts to come public and come on record with it.
Yes, that is part of their job.
What about politicians? What about, for instance, the
impeachment motion? Now you'll come to that.
No.
Just one second.
Yeah.
You have asked a question about the 4 judges. Yes, but please don't leave the task just to 4 judges.
Sure.
The media must stand up and see and not get caught in these useless statements of ministers and others. Everybody has to contribute to shielding these institutions. Mr. K.P.S. Gill used to say very well that you can't have a first-rate anti-terror operation and a third-rate system in the courts. In the same way, you can't have a situation in which the judges will say freedom, but we will only keep asking this or that. Is freedom good or not good? Freedom can also be misused. Why is it not? Why should there not be restrictions? That's the type of questions we are asking. And the same way, citizens alone cannot save freedom if let us say in this case, the judges don't stand up. So everybody has to do his part of the job. That's the way out.
I'll ask you largely about governance, and this was a government that promised greater degrees of transparency. This was a government that said whether it's, allocation of natural resources, we will go through auctions and so on and so forth. Are we moving towards a less transparent and a more opaque governance system today? And I'll ask you that in the context of 2 examples. For instance, the right to information. The latest data seems to suggest that for the first time since the RTI was actually brought in, we've seen a decline as far as the right to information applications are concerned. Some could argue that maybe things are so transparent that people don't need to approach the government anymore. But the other indicator could perhaps be that it's taking far too long for people to get answers, or it's being blocked at various levels. What is your point of view?
Madam, I have said for 3.5 years that the right to information will be systematically choked, and that is exactly what is happening. Secondly, sedition. How many journalists and others, Hardik Patel and others, have been hauled up under the law of sedition? Sedition means the overthrow of the country. Tell me, isn't that choking free speech? So there is a systematic attempt, and in the right to information, it is not just that things are taking long, but that things are completely blocked. Today you see that something is, that such and such data is not information, somebody says. You try and get any figure from the Prime Minister's office and see what happens. Similarly, on the question of opaqueness, you are so well acquainted with the economy. What about these so-called non-performing assets? My father used to say India is the only country in which non-performance is an asset. These bad loans.
Yes.
In the government data says that in the last 4 years, 2,80,000 crores of bad loans have been written off. Okay? Why do you not disclose those names? You say confidentiality. And every one of them had shouted at when Rajiv Gandhi's government had said confidential, when we had opposed it, when they said confidential, this customer confidentiality in regard to BOFAs. After all, these are public sector banks. That means it is the citizens' money. Yes. And they have written off to friends of somebody.
Since we're talking about the issue of opaqueness and transparency and governance, I also want to understand your point of view on the introduction of the electoral bonds, because this is going to be the first election that we will see the electoral bonds being used.
Yes, it is. There is no doubt that these will be monitored by the government as to who purchases them. And this is another device so that there is everybody who gives any money to the to parties opposing them will be targeted in the subsequent round. No doubt on that.
What is your take on the economy today, Mr. Shourie? And you know, I started my interview by asking you about the white paper that you had put together at the start.
Remember.
You don't remember that. But let me ask you about your assessment of the economic situation today.
In my view, the economy is not the issue today. The survival of institutions is the central issue. The survival of freedom is the central issue. Whether Kashmir will be further pushed out of India is the issue. Whether the people of Nepal will be further pushed into the lap of China is the issue. Whether the people of Sri Lanka will be further pushed into the lap of China, back into the lap of China is the issue. Those are the issues. Whether we are not entangling ourselves in the American strategic perspective, which will be serving only their own interests, that is the issue.
You talked about diplomacy, you talked about our external equations. So let me ask you then about China, because you just talked about China and its growing presence in our neighborhood. We've just seen the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping. What the outcome of that meeting is, we're not clear today. But what is your own assessment of the India-China equation in this context?
Well, there is no comparison between the two. China is 5 times ahead of us in the economy, and there are maybe 20 times ahead of us in defense preparedness. In our case, 1/3 of our Air Force fleet is not functional. Weapons, and you just see the testimony of the Vice Chief of Staff to the Parliamentary Committee, that they have absolutely no money left for modernization. And that they don't even have the 7,900 crores are supposedly, or more than that, have been given for just security in their own bases, forget protecting the people. But there is zero budgetary allocation for that. And you are competing with China. So these ceremonial meetings are of no consequence. And as it's a very good interview that Ashutosh Varshini has done with Robert McFarker, one of the keenest observers about China, which the Indian Express published yesterday or day before yesterday, I think everybody should reflect on that, in which he says that it's just, the essence of it is that all this talk that is being made in India about the success of the meeting and so on, that's just Indians talking. China has a consistent view, which there's a book called A 100-Year Marathon by Michael Pillsbury, one of the acutest observers for the CIA and for the Pentagon about the Chinese strategic pursuit, that they will be the dominant power in the world by 2049, 100 years after 1949 takeover of power. And India is not even figuring in that. It is just regarded not even as a nuisance, but as a potential nuisance, which may become a nuisance, a bit of a nuisance, if it allies very closely with Japan and with Vietnam and Australia and US. So the Chinese from time to time make these goodwill statements and so on, so that India just think here, there is some option here. That's all.
Do you believe that this idea of a federal formation, as is being discussed today with Mamata Banerjee, KCR, the possibility, the prospect of that is a real one?
Well, I don't know, but it should be. I don't know whether it is. Only they will know. I feel that there is a way out, that they must first agree that we shall have only one candidate against a BJP candidate. Secondly, don't hurry into a federal front and so on just now. As Mr. Yashwant Sinha has been saying, hold the meetings in different state capitals. And the place where that meeting is held is the host for and the convener of this front for that meeting. And third, you will have to leave the decision of this allocation of seats between parties to the person who's the dominant person in that state or that sub-state. If the state has many regions and so on, like North and South Karnataka or East and West UP and so on, then you have to leave it to the good sense of that person. That he would realize that yes, we must get everybody together, and therefore I am not going to completely usurp all the seats for myself. I will be far-sighted enough to, bring, to allocate seats rationally. So these considerations can certainly bring about a front.
Well, Mr. Shourie, it's always a pleasure speaking with you, sir. Thank you very much for your time, and we wish you the very best of luck going forward. Appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18.
Thank you.
With that, it is time for us to wrap up Political Exchange. From all of us here, goodbye and many thanks for watching.